r/ask Reddit. What do you think is the most interesting psychology phenomenon? I'm amazed at the number of people who freeze in a disastrous situation like a sinking ship. People who survive tragedies like that always report that there's not nearly the amount of panic and confusion that you'd expect. A lot of people freeze in place and simply can't move, even as the water is rising around them. Families have been split up in situations like this, where 2 of them can move, but the other 3 can't. Yep, the freeze reaction doesn't get the attention it deserves, and it's something that's actually really important for us to understand. Freezing is part of the same process that triggers the fight-flight response, and usually occurs when people can't do anything to actively exit or combat what's causing them stress. Freezing is a really old response evolutionarily speaking, and is something of a last-ditch way the body tries to save itself. As a result, people tend to go into fight-flight first, and then eventually freeze if they still can't control the stress they're experiencing. On the practical side, this has some hugely important implications for helping people in distress. If someone who is panicking suddenly becomes much less responsive or almost catatonic, they're not okay. It can look like they've calmed down, but most likely they've just entered the freeze response. That means that as their stress does reduce, they're going to go back into fight-flight before they actually get to a point where they feel better. And we have to be ready for that. On a more mundane note, in our personal life we also need to look for evidence of freeze in response to daily stressors. If you're super anxious about work, and then start feeling less anxiety, but also tired, zoned out, you may be entering freeze. People mistake this for merely being worn out, when in reality their body is struggling to manage chronic stress. Okay, I'm at work now waiting for lunch and this happens to me. How do I respond, combat this? We tend to hate people that have the same flaws and make the same mistakes as we do. When I drive I hate cyclists. When I'm on my bike I hate drivers. I hate both all the time. How I can have a surprise in my dream, like something will happen and I'll be confused about it, then someone will explain it by giving new information, and then it makes sense. But all of this is created by my own brain while I'm dreaming. How can I reveal new information to myself to explain something? This also fascinates me. My brain has created things in my dreams that baffles me to this day. But isn't my brain supposed to be me? So where are these creations coming from? I have a roommate that never really opens their door and I've only caught the briefest of glances into their room as he exits it. So I had no real idea what their room looked like. One night though I had a dream and my mind decided to stitch all these memory fragments together and recreated his room in my dream. Then when a couple days later I actually stepped into his room for the first time to check something out for him, it felt like I'd been there before and my brain made a pretty accurate full representation. It felt crazy. False memories. How you can implant false memories in someone over time, and they believe they are real and their reactions are based on their own reality. Edit. Thank you guys for all the amazing responses. I know the Mandela effect, but I wanted to bring up that this happens on an individual level too, not just groups of people. Also, I have not seen the movie Inceptions. I don't watch a lot of movies and don't have Netflix, Hulu, or things like that, or a TV. Edit 2. Thank you guys for showing me many more phenomenal information about memory. I had no clue. My own personal experience with this. When I was 9 years old I was hospitalized with severe asthma that nearly killed. Blood oxygen level was 62. The entire hospital stay was such a blur because my brain was not functioning properly. Both my parents were in custody battles and tried to convince me the other parent never once stepped into my hospital room. The last time I spoke with my mother, about a decade, I am sure she would still say my father never visited me. Luckily my grandma, the voice of reason and sanity in my childhood, simply said to me, "They both visited you. They are both telling you lies." This is actually a real problem when trying to solve bad traffic accidents. When people are in shock, even the questions by the police can make them think that something happened. That's why eyewitness testimony is unreliable unless there are 2 or more corroborating witnesses. The placebo effect. The idea that belief in something can actually have a positive impact on the body just seems so crazy to me. Also helped me realize inversely why stress and anxiety can take such a toll on you. Funny enough, placebo also works when you know it's placebo. Somehow, deep down, there is something in you that wants to believe despite all reasonable arguments against it. Also, nocebo is a thing. When you expect something to harm you, it will. It makes a lot of treatments complicated. On one hand, you want the patient aware of the side effects. On the other, you don't want them to generate them by the nocebo effect. Also, nocebo is a thing. When you expect something to harm you, it will. Parenting 101. If you don't freak out about it, your toddler is indestructible. If you get yourself to be really happy and excited to see other people, they will react the same to you. It doesn't always happen the first time, but it will definitely happen next time. Time and again, this has always worked fine for me. How do you do that? Just act like a dog. Dogs are always excited to see people. Dreaming. Even though everyone does it, it's amazing that our minds create virtual realities for us nightly. If you can lucid dream, it can be more entertaining than any game technology has invented. Why do our brains create nightmares, though? It seems so masochistic for your own mind to create nightmarish scenarios that would never happen in real life, or simply relive bad memories over and over. This has always baffled me. Normally our biology avoids pain at all costs, but the brain seems to obsess over it while we dream. I wonder if it is our brain's way of processing how we deal with scary situations. I've heard that dreams help us process predicaments and emotions, so I wonder if nightmares are a way we work through threats and stress. Playing. When two animals play with each other, they both communicate aggression. They show fangs, claws, they bite, they go for the neck, etc. Everything about it should communicate danger, but they never feel endangered, even when one animal accidentally hurts another. This happens even when animals are playing with animals they have barely known for some time. It blows my mind how the right context completely transforms all the communication between animals who play. My understanding is that dogs have little pauses throughout a play fight that confirms it's just playing, and that dogs get so riled up when humans play fight because they sometimes can't tell when it's for real. Have you ever had a dog sneeze at you when it's showing its fangs and goofing off? That's another way they communicate play. I love dogs. Yo yo yo. Bro, it's okay. Achoo. See, I'm just playing. Bro, achoo. Deja vu. To have such a strong feeling that an instance has happened before is crazy, like you experienced it in the past, or dreamed of it. The other vus are fascinating too. Presque vu is when something is on the tip of your tongue but you can't remember it. Jamais vu is when something familiar seems unfamiliar. Open bracket. It's the opposite of deja vu. Don't forget dormez vu. When you think Brother John is sleeping, but he is not. Denial. The many answers to evade the truth are very creative. Nut up. Edit. Okay. Row. Open bracket. I'm crying. You guys OMG. Denial is rooted in perception of threat. If you manage to convey the same words in a way that doesn't make it as a threat, you'll shave off most of it. Prospect theory. The idea that people perceive gain and loss unequally, where a loss has about twice as much impact on a person as a gain of same amount. People will take unnecessary risks to avoid loss. Like why I didn't cash in all my crypto at 20k. How laughter affects people. Laughter is basically the yin to stress's yang, which inspires me to make people laugh when I can. As I don't know what they're going through, laughter increases things like dopamine, and can even help soothe physical pain sometimes. Even smiling, lifting the corners of your mouth, alone has positive effects on you, even if you force it. Man, the human brain is a weird and ducked up thing. It's like millions of years of spaghetti code in there. Dissociative disorder. So dissociative disorder is a mental disorder that involves experiencing a disconnection and lack of continuity between thoughts, memories, surroundings, actions and identity. People with dissociative disorders escape reality in ways that are involuntary and unhealthy and cause problems with functioning in everyday life. I don't have a dissociative disorder, so to say, but the scariest symptom of my severe anxiety is dissociating. The world does not look as real. The sunlight on the earth looks superficial. Sounds are a little quieter or much louder. Houses and trees look a little different. Like it's a hyper-realistic rendering of the world that's almost spot on but not exactly. I feel like I'm dreaming and become completely numb emotionally. I'm just there, separated from everything and feel like I'm not real. I could stare straight ahead for hours in this state and not think of a single thing. It's awful and I would trade that mental response for a panic attack any day. Edit. This blew up. Thanks for the gold. Kind stranger. Holy shit, you described this perfectly. I always tried explaining as like I'm watching through a film layered over the world, or it's like I'm watching my life on a TV. I can't actually perceive what's going on and don't feel like I'm actually present and able to enjoy anything. But it's like I actually visualize things differently. Like I don't process what I see. I just sort of move around in space. The amount that the words we use and think in changes how we act. People who speak Spanish are less likely to blame someone for dropping something, because the language is the thing was dropped rather than you dropped the thing. Australian Aborigines have no words for left, right, etc. Instead they use north, east, south, and west. As a result, they almost always know what direction they are facing, even inside buildings with no exterior view. Deaf children in Africa using a made-up sign language had not developed signs for describing positioning. Under, over, to the right of, etc. And when tested, they could not find a hidden object, even when they watched it be hidden. They couldn't tell themselves in their own minds where to look for it, and so they couldn't find it. Very interesting. The African kid thing blows my mind. It's interesting that your spoken language is also your brain's language. One of the scariest things about the book 1984 is the realization that controlling language can control thoughts. If you take away words that help people visualize things you don't want them to know, those ideas fade from possibility. Why do people have favorites? Like a favorite color or a favorite flower? Or a favorite child? Damn it, Mom. What did I do to you? You know, this is actually a really interesting question. For me it is the unconscious mind and the fact that it accounts for the majority of our cognitive activity. I think it's interesting how we can simultaneously both know and not know things. It is also interesting, and perhaps even frightening, that we are not running the show to the extent that we think we are, at least not consciously. I like catching my unconscious mind making decisions for me. The one that I've catch the most is actually when to get up out of bed. You would think that is a decision that your conscious mind makes, but if you think about it soon after sitting up you'll realize you just kinda did it without actually deciding to get up. It's weird. I can't relate to this. Every morning is a struggle for me. Okay, get up on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. If I let subconscious brain work that out, we'd go back to bed. If you're talking to someone intently and you hand them something, more often than not they'll take it. Doesn't matter if it's a book, a pen or an orange. No idea what the phenomenon is called or if it's even psychological, but it's made for some great pranks. In the same vein, you can look straight up towards the sky in a public location, and everyone else around you will look up, too. Similar results if you start screaming on a flight. When Japanese tourists go to Paris, see how not romantic it is, and have crippling panic attacks. I'm surprised to learn the Paris syndrome is apparently a real thing. Who would have thought? Similarly, there's the Jerusalem syndrome where people go insane thinking they are a new religious figure or just go absolutely crazy for the city and about their religion and run off from their family and tourist groups to worship on their own. The bystander effect. Everyone thinks they would help if something happens, but the effect says that the more people there are, the less someone is going to help. I experienced this today on my commute. I started to get really dizzy, lightheaded and get tunnel vision. I was too out of it to ask for help, and everyone was just ignoring me, until this one little old lady bullied someone into giving me their seat. All of a sudden I was surrounded by help. Someone was fanning me, another person gave me tissues, etc. I'm so incredibly grateful for that woman who stopped to ask if I was alright. I am glad. The old lady was there for you and everything ended good. That's why it's important that people know about the effect. If you're ever in a situation like this again and no one is helping you, you should talk to one person directly, like, hey you, man in the blue shirt, help me. The gambler's fallacy, specifically, how the same series of events can lead to two different conclusions. Assume you have a perfectly fair coin. You toss it 5 times and get 5 heads. You then ask 2 people what they think the 6th toss will be. Person A thinks that heads is obviously on a roll, so he bets on heads. Person B thinks that heads has happened too many times, which means that tails has to come up, so he bets on tails. They're both wrong. The odds of the 6th throw remain the same, regardless of what happened in the past. Open bracket. Note that this only works if the coin is fair. Sunk cost fallacy as well, where you have devoted so much time resources into something to where it makes it harder to just let go. For example, a long-term relationship you know is doomed. You're more likely to try and hang on to it due to all of the work you put in and the fear of losing all that progress. Reddit screws this one up all the time though. The more technical definition is that you shouldn't consider costs already incurred when making a decision. Only consider potential future costs and benefits. The part I see people screw up a lot is that in many situations those past costs mean lower future costs, so the alternative with the sunk costs is still better. Locus of control. Lock basically is how you view control over your own life. People either have an internal lock where they believe they have the power to control their own lives, or an external lock where you believe everything in life comes from a source other than yourself. I got fired because my boss hates me. I was late because traffic, etc. Now, what's interesting is that studies have shown people with an internal lock find greater satisfaction and success in almost every aspect of life, except one. Being in a nursing home drives internal lock people crazy while external lock people thrive. While the nursing home bit is very fascinating, my grandmother did surprisingly well in a nursing home, and I think this probably explains why. I know for a fact I would hate living in one. Synesthesia. This happens when you experience one sensory stimulus and it triggers another. For example, you hear a splash and think of the color blue. I get this quite vividly with tastes. If I see a plastic fork, I always taste ketchup for some reason. I only learned about this years ago, but would always get weird looks as a child when trying to describe songs by color. Hey, what's that one Linkin Park song that sounds like green lightning with silver X's floating through it? Double quote. Up edit. Song was points of authority. I have this with numbers and words. When I was so little, probably 4 years old or even less, I loved the numbers 6, 8 and 68 because they were cute, young girls. 6 is also pink for me, 8 is more like golden or even silvery. 6 is extremely girly, 8 is more mature, a young adult. The Monkisphere. Simply put, how your brain has evolved to have an upper limit on the number of people you can conceptualize as people, after which they just become people, and are then clumped into groups, the perception of which can be warped drastically by hearsay, the media, your own bias, etc., which goes a very long way to explain why many things in human society are the way they are. Cotard delusion, aka walking corpse syndrome, where the sufferer genuinely believes that they are dead, don't exist, or have no internal organs. Absolutely crazy. I can't imagine what it feels like walking around feeling actually, genuinely dead. I experienced this for a period of time after my dad passed away when I was younger. It was terrifying and traumatic. I felt as if I was hollow inside, with no organs or vessels, just empty muscle, and was a ghost that everyone else could see. Thankfully those delusions don't plague my life anymore, but it was so dark and awful. Childhood amnesia. The fact that up until a certain point you don't remember things. My first memory isn't until I was 6. My wife's is when she was 2. Hers seem to be emotionally based, so they're sparse and fleeting. Mine are like I just suddenly had a switch flipped, and there I was. You skipped your backstory. How people who hate themselves hate people who like them. How can I not think my friend is a shitty person when I look at who he hangs out with? Well, at least they are being consistent. Tholiada. That 2 people can have the same shared psychosis or better yet hallucinations is just insane. The transference there. As a psych major this one gets me. I'm going to psych nerd out a bit, since I did research on this phenomenon. but facial information processing errors associated with depression are super interesting. Folks with major depressive disorder, MDD, are actually way more likely than their peers to misidentify and selectively focus on emotional responses from other people. They have a much higher risk of misperceiving neutral faces as negative, and for missing facial cues that indicate positive information. At the same time, folks with MDD are also much better at noticing negative facial emotion indicators. Similarly, people with anxiety disorders tend to be much more likely to see neutral faces as angry. I find it really interesting because it shows how a mood disorder like depression is way more complex than we sometimes give it credit for. Information processing problems can be triggered by, and in turn reinforce, someone's depression. If we focus just on mood as our metric for what constitutes recovery, we miss some really interesting and potentially useful ways to provide treatment. Cognitive dissonance. If our actions don't match up with our opinions, beliefs, wishes, etc., something will give and either our actions will change or our mindset will. Doesn't sound very interesting until you use this to hack your life in a sense. Ever heard of the law of attraction? It's kind of like this. The law of attraction claims that if you want something, just pretend like you already have it. Envision that you have it and you live it. Want to lose weight? Envision you at your ideal weight every night. Sounds like complete BS, and in a sense it is. But it applies to cognitive dissonance, and if you play your cards right it works. For me, I was a very shy person. I wanted to become talkative and get friends and guys. So, I would tell myself, I'm not shy. People love me. I have tons of friends. My beliefs did not match up with my actions. I wouldn't talk to people. But eventually something gave and I started to act in accordance to my beliefs. Either you will give up on pretending or you will become how you believe yourself to be. Something to think about. Law of attraction isn't a proven thing, but cognitive dissonance is. The effect of a person's environment, expectations and upbringing on schizophrenia. Specifically schizophrenics that hear voices hallucinate. In a lot of societies, these voices are usually aggressive, dark, cruel, or they simply torture the one experiencing them, calling names and undermining them. In others, usually more spiritual societies, the voices are calm, benevolent and actively trying to help the listener. It is thought that this is the result from how those societies see the schizophrenic. In most, it's seen as a horrible mental disease. In popular culture and media, even dangerous. This stigma gives the person involved a negative view of their mental condition and causes them to internally demonize it. And exactly that creates the evil voices. They believe it is negative, so it becomes more negative. After all, the voices are a figment of their own imagination. In some cultures, schizophrenics aren't labeled that, but are seen as shamans or priests, or a gifted person with a strong spiritual connection. The voices are interpreted as guides, deceased ancestors, or even God self. They don't perceive it as an evil, so the voices do not become evil. The person hearing them doesn't suffer that much from it, of course. Feeling a sense of grandeur because of your mental state is also not a healthy thing. But for the one involved, it is a better alternative than being tortured by voices telling you you're trash or that you should do horrible things, or just screaming, making noise. It can be treated with antipsychotics to a certain degree, but it would be lovely if one day we as a society could look at schizophrenia in a more healthy manner, so that those who have it aren't as plagued by it, because they have a more neutral view of it. I hope it is possible someday. Mass hysteria. The fact that our brains can cause us to have symptoms of something serious just because of rumors and fear is pretty crazy. Near where I live, they put up a bunch of windmills to generate power. Someone read that the motion of the windmills can give people headaches in rare cases. As the information circulated, suddenly people started developing severe headaches. After a while, people forgot they were supposed to be getting headaches from the windmills and the headaches slowly vanished. Phantom limb syndrome. The ability to feel sensations and even pain in a limb or limbs that no longer exist. Phantom limb syndrome is characterized by both non-painful and painful sensations. Non-painful sensations can be divided into the perception of movement and the perception of external sensations. Exteroception, including touch, temperature, pressure, vibration, and itch. Pain sensations range from burning and shooting pains to feelings of tingling pins and needles, while phantom limb syndrome occurs only in amputees. Phantom sensations may be perceived in people who have survived strokes but lost function of certain body parts or who have spinal cord injury or peripheral nerve injury. Phantom limb syndrome was first described in 1552 by French surgeon Ambroise Paré, who operated on wounded soldiers and wrote about patients who complained of pain in amputated limbs. The same syndrome was later observed and noted by French scientist, mathematician, and philosopher René Descartes, German physician Aaron Lamos, Scottish anatomist Sir Charles Bell, and American physician Silas Weir Mitchell, who tended to wounded soldiers in Philadelphia during the American Civil War. Scottish physician William Porterfield wrote a first-hand account of phantom limb syndrome in the 18th century, following the amputation of one of his legs. He was the first person to consider sensory perception as the underlying phenomenon of the syndrome. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.